Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Double M Radio Gamescast. It's episode number 45. We're making it quite far this year. Somehow managed to not explode yet, so that's pretty impressive. As always, I'm your host, Ryan, and I'm joined by my lovely cohort of co-hosts, Alex.
Hi. I every time you do the countdown for this episode, it keeps reminding me of iCarly.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the inspiration. Not really. We got Brett.
Hello.
And we got Wyatt.
Hi.
That was unfortunate. All right.
I don't have the energy to do something wacky today. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's acceptable. So, we got some big news this past week, and by big news, I mean news that we all knew was going to happen. We've known for a long time that this is probably going to happen. That's Mass Effect remakes. And on the tales of Mass Effect, logical conclusion about what Mass Effect is known for, side characters. So we're doing an episode on side characters. Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah.
Sir, Mr. Ryan.
Yeah, yeah.
Please let me go.
Please let us out of the podcast dungeon now.
1-800, this is a bit.
It's been 45 episodes.
Oh no. We're so far down the rabbit hole at this point. All right. So we do games on the show. And by games we do awards. We used to do games. We don't do games anymore cuz we talk about games. Why double
Games
up?
are stupid.
Yep. So I got to put an award out this year in light of GameSpot continually putting articles out remembering years. So 20 years ago, it was 2001. So this award, I want you guys, I'm going to give you a list of games from 2001, and I want you to tell me which one you could do without.
Oh.
All right? But of course, these are all very good games.
Oh.
So, we're going to start it out with Paper Mario. Came out on February 5th, 2001. All right? Everyone got that?
I have a question.
Wow.
Yeah?
Are any of these games by Goo?
I think Goo went defunct in 99, so I'm going to have to say no.
Shame.
What a
But
shame.
I feel just as poorly. We have Silent Hill 2,
Oh.
and we've got Grand Theft Auto 3. It was a big year in video games. And if I wanted to get really hard, I could say we had Metal Gear Solid 2, but I'm not going to put that at risk. So
Now, would doing without these games mean that the company had never made them and thus never made
and you
their
know what?
sequels?
Because I like chaos, I'm going to also add in Halo Combat Evolved. So if we had to wipe one of these games from existence, the idea never entered anyone's heads. It was gone forever. Which game will we wipe? All right.
Because I'm an idiot, can you list the first one again?
We have Halo, Grand Theft Auto 3, Silent Hill 2, and Paper Mario.
Okay.
I've never played the original Paper Mario, but I still feel like
I'm
it's
gonna be
very
honest. I'm gonna be honest with you. The way I'm judging these, I've only played one of these games, so I'm only really like attached to one of these games, which is Combat Evolved. The other ones I just haven't played before. So like I think I'm kind of looking at it from like what do I think was more what affected the industry the most?
Yeah, that's partly
Yeah.
the idea.
Partly the idea, but again, it's hard to judge just because I haven't played
Okay.
most of these, so it's kind of hard to.
All right, so Wyatt, I'm going to ask you. It's okay to go on not having played any of them. All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
I want to hear your answer. So what is it? What game are you most willing to forget?
Probably Paper Mario, because I think that is probably the one game and the one series I know the least about on that entire list. So I just don't care enough, I guess. It also seems like a game that didn't really like shake up the industry that much. Not that it's bad, but like I don't really see it having too much of an impact overall compared to the other games. So
All right. I gotta throw my ring in there. I love Paper Mario, but I have to agree with you because Paper Mario, I think, had one really, really good sequel, which was Thousand Years Door. The rest of them have been kind of iffy. So, of these franchises, I think that's the one I'm most willing to lose. All right, Brett, what you got?
I'm gonna jump on the Paper Mario train because I've played a couple like because Paper Mario is an RPG, right?
Yeah, it's an
Or is that
RPG.
just about
Yes.
moving over? Okay. I've played a few that came out before, and I played a few that came out after, and there's its blood isn't in any of them. It literally just does not have any
Yeah.
legacy outside of Paper Mario. And when you look at something like Silent Hill or GTA or Halo, like they're pretty heavy hitters for their genres. So yeah, Paper Mario can be obliterated
Wow.
All
just
right.
this once.
All right, Alex, what's your vote here?
Normally, I'd go along with Brett's solid reasoning there. Um, but this is, for me, entirely personal and not at all business. I'm axing John Halo.
All right. All right. I understand.
Whoa. Wait. I'm sorry.
He has done nothing but give me headaches.
Yep, John
Hi,
Halo
Alex.
leading to Destiny.
and to Halo
That-
Infinite.
That is
That was
that is not fair. All right, do we want you want to talk about bad game sequels for a minute here? How many bad Silent Hill games have we gotten?
I don't know because nobody remembers any of them.
That's
How many
exactly
sequels
what
are
I'm
there?
saying.
they don't make anymore though. They're
Yeah.
still making bad
Yeah,
Halos.
but I would argue there isn't a bad, like, at least from what I've seen, there isn't a Halo game that is worse than a Silent Hill sequel. Like one of the
How can
bad
you say
Silent Hill sequels.
not
You can't really
how can
compare
you say
them.
that in an
Like,
accusatory way? How can you say that because they're literally nothing alike?
I'm just saying.
there's no way you can compare those two. They're so far afield. But it's okay because we have a winner. And by winner I mean we have to forget this game permanently and never talk about it on the show again. And
I'm
that
just
is
gonna
Paper
forget-
Mario.
I'm just gonna forget everything
It's
that
wiped
Alex
from the
said
timeline.
because I still like Alex, so I'm just gonna like forget that he ever said that, so we can keep being friends.
I'm gonna accept that what Alex was saying was born out of hatred and intense
I'm sorry,
For
I
something
have
that was not
relationships.
Halo's
problems.
fault. For something
abusive
that wasn't Halo's
relationships with
fault.
Bungie.
It's Alec, that was gonna be my second answer. It's okay. I kind of agree with you a little bit.
All right.
Oh.
We can air our issues with Bungie
This
at
marks
another
my
time.
last
In fact, we have
episode on this podcast.
Okay, bring it in. Bring it in. We have a winner. We did it. We don't have to keep debating. All right. So we got some game announcements this week. Before we get to I say it's the big one, but we all knew it was coming. It's Mass Effect. We got some smaller ones, and that's Total War Warhammer 3. We got a Warhammer 3 announcement coming out this year. We knew this was happening. We knew it would likely be this year. But I think people that like Total War, including myself, are very excited for it. Especially because they're showing some weird factions that don't exist in the tabletop games, which is really exciting. We're getting a like Asian-inspired faction called the Cathay. It looks very interesting. So
The cafe.
the Cathay,
It's
like cat hay.
the cat? I was gonna make like a cafe joke, but
I know you were. It
I
was going to be bad.
I was
so.
verging on something cappuccino related as well.
Yeah, I was
All
thinking something
right.
like espresso. I'm sorry.
It's going to be one of
Can't
those
wait.
episodes.
Can't wait to watch the Mandalore gaming video on that game and have that be the only interaction I ever have with it. Just like every other Warhammer game.
Yeah, well, you're in for a 2-hour-long video.
Yeah, those are the best ones.
It's great. Yeah, I don't know. Total War Warhammer is a really, really good strategy game if you're into them, especially if you like real-time strategy. So that's exciting. And they are also unique in that when you buy a Total War Warhammer game, you can continue to use the other game's content in the next game. So every game, they like add in all the factions from the old games after a little while and bring them up to date with the new stuff.
So it's actually like buying the tabletop game then.
Yep. So basically what Warhammer 3 is going to shape up to be is essentially like you have the entire roster of like Warhammer fantasy.
Hell
if you do
yeah.
it. At this point, they've run out of Warhammer fantasy factions essentially and are having to add new ones like the Cathay.
Warhammer
So-
Endgame.
Yeah, it's a very, very fun franchise. Okay, so Factorio is getting an expansion pack. We don't really have any other details about that, but it's getting an expansion pack. It's also sold over 2,500,000 copies, so It's a little indie game that could, especially for a game that has never gone on sale, and I think they've stated never will. So, interesting business model. It's working for them.
Trying to be like Nintendo.
Yeah, yeah. So we got some interesting news. I don't know who here has played GoldenEye.
The original?
No.
Yep.
Not a bit.
N60. Really?
I have a little bit. It was a long time ago, but I have, yeah.
That was the multiplayer RPG. Or not RPG.
RPG?
The multiplayer first-person shooter. Oh
Okay.
my god. Because
Co-op. Couch
when
co-op.
you growing up, your friend didn't have like the Xbox or whatever, right? It's too expensive, so they had an N64 lying around, and you'd play some GoldenEye on it. So it was great. GoldenEye had an Xbox 360 remaster that we knew was a thing and we knew had gotten canceled. What we didn't know is that it was basically done. Like the game, the Xbox 360 version has leaked and is completely playable. Apparently the reasons why it was not released essentially are that the company that held the licensing for Bond put so many restrictions on what they could and could not do with characters. So essentially there was Bond could not do any kind of violence against anyone that wasn't explicitly the villain, which meant your player, they need to not have the option for you to do that. And GoldenEye was like a bloodbath first person shooter, so that didn't really work out. So yeah, that got essentially was the reason that it didn't go through, is that they were super tight with the licensing, which is fun to see that now the Hitman devs are doing a Bond game.
It's gonna be beautiful.
I am excited to see what comes out of it, because I'm sure they're not like that with licensing anymore, because obviously games are much more mainstay now. They're in the mainstream media. It's not as taboo as it used to be in the N64 days to be shooting people in a first-person shooter. So, yeah.
You guys remember about the author for the Witcher books and how he reacted with the deal.
Yeah. So, our last round out game announcement before we talk about Mass Effect is Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, which is essentially Final Fantasy XIV's endgame. It is tying together and finishing the arc that has been running since the launch of the game now. It is not the end for 14, so 14 is right now Square Enix's cash cow, especially because it's consistent. 14 is not losing players, so it is really, especially after Avengers launch being such an utter trash fire. Final Fantasy XIV is just a good consistent thing they have that consistently brings in more people and gets them that monthly income. So it's good to see that still getting support, and it will continue to be getting support for a long time by the sounds of the development team. They're stating that they're going to be starting with the first patch after this expansion launches the brand new story and pushing into a new story arc. So it's very exciting to see that, and I hope to play it at some point, because I've kind of fallen out of favor with Final Fantasy XIV just because of time, but man, that game was wonderful when I used to play it. So looking forward to that. All right, we got some delays, and by some delays I mean it was Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake.
No one had that on their games list for the thing, did they?
No. I don't remember if you guys remember the bit where we were watching the Ubisoft show and they showed that remake, but it looked rough.
Yeah.
The gameplay looked pretty good, but all the cutscenes and whatnot and the character models were iffy at best.
I was surprised they were showing it off at all, to be honest, because it was it does not look presentable enough for an Ubisoft show.
And the interesting thing with this delay is that we don't have even a time frame. They've just stated they're moving it to in the future. So we've gotten a lot of delays this year, understandably. We'll probably continue to get a lot of delays this year. Usually they're accompanied by a time frame, so this is a little more concerning, I think, in that it means they probably have a lot more work to do.
Sounds like it's going to be lost to the sands of time.
Oh boy.
That was a stretch, even by my standards. That was rough.
If it helped, I was looking at a camera in my room that isn't there.
It doesn't.
To the audience.
Stop jimming the camera, Alex. All right. In more sad news, the hero shooter Battleborn is shutting down for good. I think it might actually be shut down at this point. I'm pretty sure that happened this last week.
And as much as you may want to meme on it, from what I played, which is granted a
Very
while
little.
ago, kind of
bit,
when it first came out, it was actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
Like,
it also
I
the thing I
actually
liked is
enjoyed
it
it a
had a
lot.
whole like not single player but multiplayer campaign mode.
Did
Yeah.
it come out as an Overwatch competitor?
Yes.
Well, okay. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase
It
it.
marketed
I think
itself
they
as an
made a
Overwatch
game.
competitor,
I think
despite
it's unfortunate
not
that,
being an Overwatch competitor.
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
It's
me sad
more
because
in the
it's really
vein.
not the same game.
I think the most similar game to it
Anyway.
is Smite. Like,
Yes.
it is way more in the MOBA section than Overwatch is, but
I do
really
think,
actively marketed itself as an Overwatch competitor.
And I do think part of it too is that this is the first game that Gearbox had made since Colonial Marines, and I think that was still kind of a raw wound for
And like
a lot
this was
of people.
pre Borderlands 3. I honestly feel like if Battleborn had come out more close to now, it probably would have done pretty well. It feels like we're in a drought for that kind of game right now, especially seeing as it leads us into our next thing that Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 are not slated for 2021. So we are not liable to see either of those this year, which is kind of surprising for Overwatch 2, considering that
I was going to say
just an update essentially.
It's kind of just an overhaul more than anything else.
It's like an update with some other game modes that they're adding and some like PvE
in a single
content.
player. Yeah,
a single player, really?
I don't know if it's single player or if it's co-op.
No, it's about time though.
I think you can play it. I think you can do it just single player, from what I remember.
Yeah. And yeah, so we do know they're also working on a Diablo 2 remake with Vicarious. I'm curious to see if that's coming out soon, because from the sound of it, with Vicarious works fast. They're known for working pretty quickly, and they also tend to announce things very close to release. Like we got the Tony Hawk remake announcement, I think about 6 months before the game came out, and was phenomenal. So I could see Diablo 2 remake being this year. At the same time, I think the absorption of Vicarious into Blizzard kind of bodes poorly for that. And that it seems like they really needed the full team to be working on that. So I'm betting either we're going to see it towards the end of the year and fall, or it's going to be early 2022 would be my bet. But yeah, I'm starting to get worried about Blizzard. They have not put anything out for a very long time. And it seems like COVID has hit them particularly hard, because I do believe that Overwatch 2 was set up for this year. And yeah, Shadowlands did launch this past year, but that WoW audience tends to be consistent regardless. So I don't think that's breaking into their market share for their other types of titles. Yeah.
Right.
I want them to release a new game. So as much as I would love the Diablo 2 remake, I really want to see what they have in store with Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2. So hopefully that stuff comes out. All right, great. That means now we can talk about the big boy in the chat, which is Mass Effect Legendary Edition.
Would we say, because there's 3 of them?
Well, there's 3 of them, but they're being sold as one product, so it's like Siamese triplets. Conjoined triplets, not Siamese triplets.
I'm scared. This is what happens when you spend 45 episodes in the dungeon. I wasn't even there for that whole time, but I think this is a cry for help.
Look, I've been there the whole time, and it gets worse. So
he's the one that actually has to upload this mess. So
oh boy. Oh, and don't even get me started on the scripting. So
what's scripting?
Well, yeah, what's scripting, Alex? All right. So yeah, Mass Effect Legendary Edition is a collection of all 3 titles with most of the DLC. There's one notable... I'm not even notable. No one really cares that this DLC is missing the Pinnacle Station for Mass Effect 1, because the source code does not exist anymore. It was an outsourced DLC for Mass Effect 1, and is basically just like a single... it's like a combat simulator essentially, and there were some kind of neat rewards behind it, but I think most of those are probably going to be moved to other spots in the game. So I personally am not missing that DLC. It was like 20 minutes total. So
they got all the important stuff. Is the
everything with any narrative whatsoever is in. So we're getting all the stuff. We're also getting finally a joined character creator for all 3 games, so your character will look consistent across the 3 games. That's commonly an issue, is that like if you wanted your character to look good, you have to design them in Mass Effect 3 and then backport them to
And
the
that's
old
kind
games.
of the theme with this collection in general, I think, is just kind of unifying all 3 games to have
Yeah.
as similar an experience as you can.
But
Despite
And I
they
think-
are not changing Mass Effect 1, which is something to mention because Mass Effect 1 plays very differently from 2 and 3. It will still be playing like Mass Effect 1, which I actually am glad about because I find it's nice to have some variation in the trilogy. So it's cool to have the old
I mean, there are
school
changes.
gameplay.
I was just looking up. I can't remember it.
But
off
like
the top of my head.
1 and 2 play completely differently. They are not the same game at all. Whereas 2 to 3 is a lot more of a like gradual shift than a dramatic change.
There's
so
a
yeah.
lot of little because I was just reading up on this not too long ago, and I'm trying to find the same.
They fixed a bunch of
There's
bugs. That
those
have been
bugs, but also
longstanding.
controls, UI, AI, like a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
is actually getting
it's
tweaked.
more that the things they've said that are notable are the things that they're not changing. So they're not changing Mass Effect 1's inventory, which is kind of a shame because 1's inventory is just like a bunch of weapon mods that essentially did nothing. So that's a bit of a shame, but at the same time, like I get that's probably a super difficult undertaking to change how that works fundamentally. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the remakes look like when they come out on May 14th of this year. Soon. We're getting some Mass Effect times real soon. And you know what Mass Effect is known for, Wyatt?
here we go.
It's known, of course,
happening?
for Miranda. And Miranda is getting some censorship.
You could say Miranda was a very well-rounded character.
Oh yeah, you definitely could.
Oh boy.
Sorry.
I think there's 2 big reasons why Asset likes the character. Why Wyatt likes the character.
Oh,
So
oh no.
yeah, all right. Basically, we're acting offended at this. I don't think any of us actually are. That Miranda is getting slightly censored. They're not changing her model or anything, but there were a number of scenes in Mass Effect 2 where the camera would just kind of focus on Miranda's rear end for long amounts of time while she's talking.
Yeah, there were definitely moments where they wanted you to take it seriously, and I remember when I played it, I just burst out laughing
Yeah.
sometimes because it was so.
Well, she goes
like,
into detail about like a
gratuitous.
childhood of being overly sexualized, and the camera is just zooming in on her butt.
No. Oh, come on. Okay, now I'm good. Glad they're getting rid of that. Holy
So
shit.
there's been a lot of articles coming out about this that are very sensationalized with titles like Mass Effect 3 being censored in like all caps. They're changing camera angles. And I don't think anyone is going to be that upset that they're gone. And I think there's solutions here. Go ahead, what?
Oh
You'd be
no.
surprised. I've definitely seen some.
I'm not surprised, but I don't think anyone who really is going to play all 3 games through for this trilogy is going to care that much.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm fine with censoring if like they kind of stop here, you know, like if they don't really go much further than that. But
Yeah, because they're not changing
Yeah.
dialogue, they're not changing anything like that. It's just camera angles. And
and-
to
and
be
that-
honest,
and
they're
that's
bad
fine.
camera angles to begin with. So
yeah,
I think the
And
other
I'm
solution
fine
they
with
could have done is, of course, add some zoom ins on Garrus. You know, just get equal opportunity butt shots.
It's like
Yeah.
spread the wealth around. Honestly, that's
And you know,
Go
to be
big or
honest,
go
I kind of
wide.
wish they'd gone that route. 'Cause that would have been very
Yeah.
entertaining.
it would.
No,
it's
I would
better
have
that way.
honestly, I would have respected that decision a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Like how Marvel Comics had a male swimsuit edition.
Wait, what?
Marvel Comics had a male swimsuit edition.
Yeah, those exist. There are
A
male
while
swimsuit
ago.
magazines.
Uh,
But yeah, that's Mass Effect. And what Mass Effect is actually often known for is really, really good side characters.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
guess what we want to talk about on this podcast? We want to get away from having to constantly just talk about video games that we're playing. So instead, we're going to talk about video games that we played before.
Oh my god!
What a change!
Wow.
And even
What a
then,
formula
I
switch
can
up.
assure you, Brett and I will likely be talking about games that we are still playing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think we're gonna start with Mass Effect because that's like the game of the hour, as it were. But I will cut us off after a certain point so we can move on to other games as well. But yeah, I think Mass Effect in general, especially the first game, the reason I think, besides just being very ambitious, it was very well written and had some really, really good companion characters. And that's something BioWare in general was known for until around
And a very
Anthem.
good villain. A very good villain.
Really good villain. And convincing villain in a lot of ways to deal with it as well. So I do want to clarify, we're not going to be spoiling like the ending of any of the Mass Effect games. We're not going to be spoiling the ending of any like side character missions or whatnot. But we will be talking a little more in detail than we usually do about things that could be considered spoilers. So we might mention like not necessarily story beats, but general things that happen to characters. We'll avoid anything towards like the end of their stories, but in order to talk about a lot of these characters, we have to talk about how the game represents them. So we have to hit on some spoilerish territory. So just be aware.
And we'll say that for every game, just in case.
Oh yeah, we
'cause,
will.
You know, be a little passionate. Again, not going to spoil every single story beat for a character, but we might have to do a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
a good rule of thumb is what we will not spoil anything around past like the halfway point, essentially.
Yeah.
But up until then, fair game for this episode at least. So with Mass Effect, that's a very interesting topic with companion characters. So I want to hear. I know most of us have played Mass Effect. Has anyone not?
I haven't.
I haven't.
Really? I thought you two had.
That most of us
It's
just
50-50
turned into
split.
half.
Well, that most of us turned into half. I think that most of us would still be most of us if we had the other members in here. But
Probably.
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're stuck with you two. So
Oh.
it's okay.
I've heard that line enough.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I'll just leave. It's
So
fine.
just get
See,
out.
Brett,
I'm
Brett,
happy
the
because
basement
usually
door's
those jokes
locked,
are
we
pointed
can't
at
leave.
me. Usually those jokes are pointed at me, so I'm just happy to be on the other side this time.
Look, I'm just in a harsh mood today, which means everyone gets gets some of it, including myself. So I'm gonna add. I think to get the conversation started, Mass Effect 1 is really, really a good kind of milestone for when video games started to be taken a little bit more seriously, especially with having ensemble casts, because we didn't get a lot of it aside from BioWare games before then. I think the biggest things before them were probably Baldur's Gate, and even then, that's more just directly taken from tabletop. That's not really a unique thing to the games. So I'd be curious on if you agree with me or not. So that's when you.
Sorry.
Wait, that's you.
No, you cut out. I was gonna say you cut out. What was that? The last part of that sentence?
Oh, I just said I think aside from like Baldur's Gate and whatnot, which are tabletop forward because tabletop games are groups. So, but yeah, it started to be more ensemble character-ness.
Did Dragon Age Origins come out before Mass Effect? It did, didn't it?
Similar time. It was
Similar.
they were within a few months of each other.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because BioWare had, I believe, a split team structure working on both.
Okay,
So
that's interesting.
yeah, why don't you talk about your Mass Effect favorites? Why at least from the first like two games. I think we should generally avoid the third game just because it's starting to get a little bit more into territory of where people haven't played.
Yeah, well, it's also it's a game that you can't really talk about without.
Yeah, like if we want to
spoiling
talk about the
other
third game, we
games.
have to spoil the ending of one pretty much, which we prefer not to do. So,
I mean, you can't talk about, in my opinion, you can't talk about Mass Effect side characters without mentioning Garrus and without mentioning Tali. I mean, those are like in
the
terms of like
duo.
For me, it is definitely what it was for me. It's like when I had two people on my team as like my two partners going into a mission, it was Garrus and it was Tali. Because I think that, especially Garrus, just at least the way I played things, he was just like my closest bro, and I loved him to death. And then Tali was my kind of romance option throughout all three games. And
and just to update, Dragon Age was 2 years after Mass Effect.
Oh,
Yeah, full 2 years. At least on
really?
the Xbox version. Yeah.
It feels like Mass Effect came out after.
I mean, it makes
When
sense
you
if you
play
look at
them.
like especially the visuals of the two games. I think Dragon Age is noticeably a little bit more detailed. Um,
Is it?
I think it's aged worse, but it's more detailed in the graphical department. Sci-fi just lets you get away with a lot of hard edges.
Because thinking about it, because I mean, I played all 3 Mass Effect games, and then I played Origins right after, pretty much. I I remember Mass Effect 1 looking better to me. Like it
Well, that's what I'm saying is like sci-fi. I think in general is just more friendly to video games than fantasy. Fantasy's got a lot of like curves and lines that aren't straight.
L-
that's
Since
fair.
since we are on, the big topic of tonight is side characters, without spoiling anything, Wyatt, I remember, I think it was one of the Mass Effect games that you were talking about before, where, and the talking about the impact of side characters, where something happened and you really regretted having to watch it because you didn't spend enough time on something.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
are you talking about? Is you talking about like the ending of 2? Is that what's going on?
I think
Without
so.
spoiling.
I think that's two.
um,
Got really
Yeah,
close
and
to
I
it.
will
we
say
don't want
for
to get into
2,
that, do
if
we?
we're playing Mass Effect 2, we're not going to get into the ending, but
Okay.
fair warning to everyone playing Mass Effect 2, do side stuff early.
Don't skip anything. That is my recommendation.
Yeah, postpone the main story in Mass Effect 2 as long as you possibly can.
Without spoiling, I was absolutely adoring Mass Effect 2 up until I realized the mistake I had made, and I made the game a grindy chore
Yeah.
for a couple of hours, and I hated it. And that was, and look, I will fully accept that it was my fault because I was not paying attention.
Yeah, Wyatt missed a side character that has a forced conversation with you at the start that becomes a party member.
I don't know how that happened. I really look, I may love these games, but I am terrible at them in a way that I don't think has ever been done before. I it is so bizarre. Um,
Yeah, it's impressive.
d-
He missed Zaid. For people who have played Mass Effect 2, Zaid is one of the first side characters you encounter.
I don't know a
You
thing
have a
about him.
mandatory conversation with him at the start, the
I
first
keep forgetting
time
his
you go to
name
Omega
until
Station.
I keep forgetting his name until Ryan retells this story.
The only
Literally
way to
every
not
time.
get him in your party is to never talk to him again after that first conversation.
I do not remember the conversation. I don't remember this character. I just don't at all.
It's
I don't know what to
amazing.
tell you. I do not know what to tell you. I will say, 1 was not my favorite. I think mostly because like the gameplay was very wonky for me. Like it obviously
Yeah.
felt very dated, which isn't its fault. I mean,
1 also
it's a game that
doesn't
came
really
out.
feel like a shooter. Should.
No.
It
It
feels a
definitely
lot more
feels like
like
a
an
first
RPG.
it feels like a first attempt of a third-person shooter from a studio that typically makes like Baldur's Gate style RPGs
It
and
feels like
stuff.
playing the Covenant weapons in Halo Combat Evolved, but just worse.
That's a good way to put it, especially with like the
Yeah.
giant circle crosshair and stuff like that.
Big
There were
circles,
like
slow
moments
reloads.
there were moments where I was like, okay, I see what is going on here. Like I see what they're trying to do, and it just doesn't work a lot of the time. And also the AI was frustratingly dumb for your
Yeah.
teammates. That's one thing actually that they're fixing is like when you would command your AI buddies around in 1, if you commanded them to a spot that was kind of near cover, but not exactly pointing at cover, they would just stand there. And it was super annoying. And that is one thing that they're changing where if they're close enough to cover, they'll take cover, which is actually really a
Yeah, a
nice
lot of
change.
quality of life stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, I'm weird in that I think 1 is my preferred Mass Effect game
That is weird.
of all of them. Not because of the gameplay, because like I play Mass Effect because I like the RPG side of it. So for me, it's that 1 I think emphasizes character builds and whatnot the most, and especially because talking back about side characters, 1 has a lot more customization of what side characters do very specifically. And if you're into that kind of thing, it lets you like really specialize your characters and turn them into the exact like combat allies you want them to be, which in turn for me at least makes me a lot more attached to them. I get a lot more attached to side characters that I actively see the influence of my decisions on them in combat. So I think that made a big difference to me. But yeah, it's like not a huge difference to the games. Like I enjoyed all three, but
Yeah. I think for me, it kind of depends on the day, because sometimes I'm like, I think Mass Effect 2 is probably like the overall best in the entire trilogy for me. But catch me on a specific day, and I'll probably like 3 more, just because there are so many like just epic moments in 3 that was just like
I've just never finished
it
3.
had
I think that's the
it
big
had
thing
the
for me.
reaction it had the reaction out of me some points where, and I'm not spoiling anything, but it had the reaction out of me where, like, if you're watching the Super Bowl with a bunch of people that are really like into it and they just go, oh, and they're like freaking out. There were moments in Mass Effect 3 where I was basically doing that, and it was like it
Yeah.
was so much fun and like so
I mean,
exhilarating.
one of the big benefits that Mass Effect has over other franchises, especially for those like side character relationships, is that they reoccur, and you carry your save over 3 full games that are like 3 full games length of content. It's not like they're short games. They are
It was
3
like,
very long RPGs.
to be honest with you, Mass Effect 3 in a lot of ways felt like watching an Avengers movie opening night. Because it's this spectacle. There's all these characters that you know, and it's all coming to like this massive conclusion. And it's just so like epic, and it's so exciting. And it's this rush to like defeat this thing. I'm not gonna say what it is, but it was so exciting. It kind of like, because I feel like there's a lot of issues with 3 that stemmed from its kind of troubled development. But I don't know, just some of those moments were so good that like I just was able to overlook a lot of the issues that I had. You know, it just because at that point they're still like developing characters a little bit further, but at that point it's more like, all right, we have these characters, let's just go
It's the
do
payoff of
some
2 games
crazy
worth of
stuff.
build up, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is like when you have the ability to pull that off, it's really really good.
Which,
It's super
speaking of
rare nowadays to get that ability.
Which, speaking of payoff, if there's one thing that they're not really changing with the collection that much, the Legendary Collection, is that they're keeping the endings, not the original Mass Effect 3 endings, the very controversial Mass Effect 3 endings, but they're doing the extended endings, which was, I think it was like free DLC as like a sorry.
Yeah, it was.
Which is what I played. And while I was like mostly satisfied with the ending that I got, it did definitely feel rushed. And I kind of wished that they could have spent more time making, not even like adding to it, just like punching it up a little bit. Because without spoiling anything, the endings that you get, because they're extended endings and they didn't really have a lot of time to they didn't have a lot of time to actually develop anything. They're kind of just stills, like still images of like certain things depending on the ending that you get.
I mean, I think the way I would put it is, I think the way to say this that is easy for everyone to understand and avoids any specifics is that the endings just don't really reflect your choices in the game.
The extended endings do a better job.
Yeah, but still, to the degree that Mass Effect was known for, like,
no,
there are
still, yeah.
And going back to the topic of especially like the side characters and whatnot, Mass Effect 3 and, well, not just 3, all the Mass Effect games have loyalty missions. It's something they're kind of popularized for side characters, is the idea of
Which
having
I never
to
liked
like earn their full trust.
I never liked that name, by the way. It just feels weird. I wish they'd called it something different.
I mean, I don't
What-
think they
what
ever
name
actually refer to them as that in the game. I think that's just the name.
I don't like that. I don't
happened.
like that name. It just
The reason they're called that is because you need to have certain characters be not need to have, but if you want certain characters to be like the best version of their character that you can have, you need them to be quote unquote loyal to you, which essentially means like they'll respect your decisions a lot more. So to do that, you obviously need to do things for them, and I think Mass Effect 1 does it the worst. The loyalty missions in one, I remember a mission for Liara is literally you pop down to a planet, you go to a tiny outpost, kill the people there, and walk out, and you're done. And there's like very little story to it. There's very little dialogue. It's just not very detailed. And then you go to Mass Effect 2, and they are pumped up to 11. Like, none of them are particularly long, but I think most of them are around 20 minutes to half an hour in length. But they are a lot more dense and packed with details about the character, learning a lot more about their relationship to other people. which I think is something that is
They're also
really important in
very
games.
they're also very unique from a gameplay perspective. Like I remember Morin's loyalty mission, for example, was very like dialogue
Yeah.
heavy and really didn't have that much action to it at all. But it perfectly fit what that loyalty mission was supposed to be. It did such a good
They
job.
fit the characters too. It's like if you're talking to a
Yep.
character that's a scientist, of course their loyalty mission isn't gonna be go murder a bunch of people. Like,
Yeah, if you're gonna do an Erdnot Rex side mission, you're gonna be messing some dudes up.
yeah, it's like
like
the missions
how
fit
it
the
works.
characters very well, which is a lot of fun because they kind of expand on what you know about them. So I think even people that haven't played Mass Effect will be familiar with the concept of loyalty missions now because a lot of other games have started to do them. Although generally now I'd say they're mandatory. They're not really side content in most games anymore. But yeah, it's something that is really, really common. I think based off of Mass Effect, and even Dragon Age started doing it as well. So yeah, it's a really, really cool system. I think in particular standouts that I want to call out in Mass Effect, besides just Garrus and Tali, I really, really like the entire cast of Mass Effect 1, which is like Liara. A lot of characters in Mass Effect 1 don't necessarily return as playable characters because Mass Effect does mix up who your party members are every game. It's not like a game that you're going to be constantly traveling with the same group of people.
Which can be a little bit annoying. Like if, for instance, your romance was like Liara in the first game, she just doesn't show up at all, or at least that much in the second game.
Yeah, you have to kind of
so
actively seek her out if you want to find her again.
Yeah, and the romance doesn't really carry over. It does in the third game, from what I remember, but not from 1 to 2.
Yeah,
and
the third game is a lot better about it, and that especially that's why people say the Citadel DLC is so good. Is that the ending, not the ending. The third game respects every decision you've made over the course of the franchise related to characters. So you get to see the kind of outcomes of all of your choices and whatnot a lot more than 2 allowed you to do with characters from 1. So,
right.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to being able to replay these games.
I'm a little sad that I played these games more recently for the first time, and now there's this remastered trilogy coming out, and it's like, I kind of wish I had started with that instead.
Yeah, because I played through 1, had a lot of fun, and then I started 2, but gave up because on 2 on PC has no way to change the mouse sensitivity. It is so
bad.
Awful. Like I had to change my DPI to I think 50 for it to be tolerable. I have
too fast
never
or too slow?
Way too fast.
Oh.
Way too fast.
And to add on to that, there's no controller support.
Yeah. So you can't use a controller. All
3 of them, I think.
Yeah, all 3. I think Mass Effect 3 might have limited controller support. I don't know if it's everything, but it's just bonkers to see that in a game that was simultaneously developed for consoles and PC. So I am really, really hoping the remakes fix that, or I'm just gonna get the Switch version and play them on the Switch.
I will also say it has this nasty habit of remapping a ton of controls to one button. Like I remember, what was it like? They remapped the enter cover button and sprint to the same button.
Yeah, because
like that.
2 and 3 have some crazy button mappings, which is weird because 1 had them all separated. I think 1 was probably more designed for PC than the later games. The same case has happened with Dragon Age, where Dragon Age is a lot more friendly to PC in Origins than it is later on, although Dragon Age is still pretty friendly because it's not a shooter. They didn't need to adapt controls as well to PC.
Yeah, it's interesting. Despite probably having the worst combat, one has the best controls, which is kind of interesting.
It makes it holds up better in comparison because of the controls being tolerable. So yeah,
that's true.
I think that's a pretty good overview of our bits from Mass Effect. I think the one thing I do want to call out specifically as the mission that I think really demonstrates a character archetype, and this is minor spoilers for an early mission in Mass Effect 2. There's your warning. Get out now if you don't want to hear spoilers about Garrus's first introduction to Mass Effect 2. But in Mass Effect 2, like Garrus in 1 is a character that you get to know very well. And his introduction into kind of throws a lot of that into like this fun limbo of when you meet him, you have to kind of put together the dots as to what he is now, and how
Oh.
he got there. And it doesn't always make sense at first, but after a little while, you start to be like, yeah, this is totally what this dude would end up doing in this situation. And I think that's a lot of fun when you know a character well enough that you can really see like why they're in the situation they're in, and get to see, especially through dialogue, like the reflections your choices had. Because regardless of your decisions in one, he will end up in that position in two. But the way he acts about it is a little bit different, which I think is the key thing in a lot of games, is that you don't necessarily need to have a completely different outcome, but you need to reflect, like in dialogue, the choices that the player made. So I think that's really, really good in his introduction. It's also fun because you don't know it's him until you see him, which is a really cool way, because I think a lot of people put it together as they're going through that mission. They're like, being a little familiar here, and then eventually you realize who it is, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I think we're gonna move on from Mass Effect for now, but that does mean, hey, Brett and Alex,
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to talk about side characters in games that you two have played.
I stopped playing video games years ago. I actually don't know why I'm here.
So Brett, I'm gonna say one word.
I don't either, if that makes you feel any better.
Brett, I'm gonna say one word 3 times, and I want you to tell me the character that comes to mind. Guns, guns, guns.
Guns, guns, guns. Okay. Are we only talking about him, or
No.
the wingmen?
So
Wingman?
I wanna give some special context to this, because I think a lot of people have not played flight action games like Ace Combat or Project Wingman, and many will not know that they have stories.
Very good ones.
Often
for
very
some
good
reason.
ones that have a lot of good characters. So Ace Combat 7, I think we can kind of put to the side here, because I think the prevailing opinion about Ace Combat 7 is that it just doesn't give you enough time with any of the characters on the side.
It's like Count is cool, but he's not as iconic as any of the wingmen.
And it's also
previous
only
ones.
Count. Like it's
only
Count.
Yeah, pretty much.
What
You have
was the
entire
enemy
squads of cool people, but
faction in one of them? I thought of like Belarus, but that's a real country.
Belga
Belgium.
is
Okay, Bologna also came to mind, but that wasn't it.
yeah,
Belka.
that's a sandwich
that's
meat. Yeah. So Ace Combat, to get Count out of the way, I think Count has some really cool rivalry moments. It's when you have a game that doesn't have in-person movement ever, you need to do your characterization in unique ways. And so the way that Ace Combat and other flight action games do it is through radio chatter. And Brett has talked about, especially I think Project Wingman's radio chatter on the podcast a few times.
Yes.
And talked about how cool it is. So I finally got around to playing it, and man, is it cool.
It's brilliant, man. Like, oh my
you
god.
really get to know these characters from very carefully selected snippets of dialogue. Like, they have 2 seconds in the middle of a fight to say something. So what do they say? You got to really, really put some work in to make sure that you get their personalities right and make them displayable through probably a grand total of like a minute of talking time.
Guns, guns, guns.
Galaxy's got a bit more. Galaxy talks a lot. So
Galaxy has a lot of Galaxy's probably if I can just jab in right there, I think even compared to the Ace Combat AWACSs, I think he is probably my favorite AWACS.
I only remember one AWACS from Ace Combat, and that's Lancaster, just because his name was cool. I don't remember anything he says.
Their names are sick. Is Lancaster
7? It's
Oh,
7.
is that-
It's like the second to last AWACS you get.
Oh, so he's not the guy that eats all the time?
I don't know.
Is there someone
could not
eating
tell
over
you.
radio chatter?
It's
Yeah.
Like you just hear a mukbang in
he's
the
the
plane?
one. No, you don't hear him eating, but he's like, he'll be like, make like trigger and make a sandwich when he's like,
Yup.
like talking about doing the mission.
Oh
It's
my
like, oh, that's
God.
cute. But yeah, a Galaxy is like, because if you read into his like little notes section, he's a DJ.
Yeah.
And so he has all that personality because he's a DJ, and it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun thing with him. All the side characters, I think Project Wingman does this a lot better than Ace Combat, and is a good game to demonstrate it. because when you think of characters in a flight game, you're like, okay, so you have your squadron. You probably got those people. So who's in your squadron? You have probably one or two other fighter planes. So you've got Diplomat and Comic in Wingman. And I think it says a lot that I can remember their names, but almost none of the names of anyone in Ace Combat 7. Aside from the characters that show up a lot in cutscenes. So yeah, it's important to characterize really well, and Wingman does a really good job of giving them character, even just like names. There's nicknames, so Diplomat calls Comic Mick constantly. It's very fun.
And Diplomat is Dip.
Yeah, Diplomat's Dip, of course. And then you got Galaxy, who is your aerial support, essentially, that directs you to do things. And of course, he's got to have some character, so you get a nice, fun DJ man to direct you to blow things up, which is a lot of fun. And then I think everyone's favorite character in Project Wingman, Brett, is Prez.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Because what's important to note is that you play the flight games, like 90% of the ones are like arcadey enough where like if you just play them and don't know anything about like jet fighters or anything, you don't know what a WSO is. And I don't even know what that stands for, but that's the person that sits in the seat behind the guy.
I think it's weapon systems operator. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% positive though.
That we'll go with that because no one is here that can tell us that that's wrong. So you know what?
So it's right now.
It's right until someone says it isn't. But yeah, so there's like a big part of Ace Combat and Wingman is that you get like upwards of like 20 jets by the end of the game, and at least like half of them usually are two-seaters. And the Ace Combat game, not a single one has like worried about who sits behind you, like at all. Like
it gets weird. Like you'll be in a cockpit. There'll be super dramatic moments where everyone's like saying, "Whoa, Trigger's doing something really cool," and then you're like, "Who's the guy behind me?"
And it's plain. It doesn't really matter too much when the game has like PS2 graphics and either pilot might be like the equivalent of like a JPEG or something in the seat, and you can't really like tell it. It's fine, and it's not the worst thing ever, even when they are like modeled in HD graphics. But it is weird enough to be like, why isn't is he okay? I am doing post-stall maneuvers and firing railguns at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and he hasn't said anything for the past 18 missions. I think he's dead. But in Wingman, they give your WSO a character since it follows the Ace Combat line of thinking, and the character you play as doesn't say anything. Your co-pilot kind of talks for you and has like she bounces off of all the other like radio chatter perfectly.
And to specify, you only get this co-pilot when you're flying a two-seater.
Yes.
Like this character is completely optional, essentially. But is like a fully fleshed out role. And a lot of people, like myself, will try to play every mission in a two-seater so we can get all the dialogue with Prez.
And it gets progressively harder to do so.
Yep. It's a fun little challenge. But yeah, I think it's really interesting when you can make a character compelling enough that people will actively choose to try and do something very difficult.
Oh yeah,
all the dialogue.
It's an achievement, I think, to like make people go through something that like there's not even a Steam achievement for it. Like there's no like tangible benefit for going through the game on what is essentially like
hard mode.
Ultra hard mode. It's with like you can't pull off the fanciest maneuvers, you can't use the fanciest weapons, you're limited by like the best two-seater is an F-14, and that's even like out of commission in our like modern militaries. But you have to do it if you want to hear what Prez has to say up until the very last mission, because you won't know otherwise.
Yeah, you'll never
Honestly,
know.
it's kind of the best achievement, one that isn't listed.
Yeah. It's also a nice like optional challenge. And it also makes for great PC mods, including the mod known as the Prez Everywhere system, which allows you to have Prez in any plane. But of course, this mod isn't just like you get the dialogue. No, they just put her as where the two-seater pilot seat would be on the plane, just in the plane. So her 3D model is constantly just like sticking through the roof if you do that, which is why I'm not using it.
Oh no!
Awesome.
I would totally
That's
use that
awesome.
if it didn't do that, but it's hilarious to see. But yeah, it's a fun thing when a game can get like a side character with minimal dialogue impressive enough to warrant something like that. So yeah, I think that's just a really cool bit of fun in flight games.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't expect them to have good side characters, but here we are.
Yep. Here we are. And you know where that is, Alex?
Oh.
That's the realm of I want you to pick a game with a side character you like.
Oh, with us. Oh, and yeah, just clearing things up. These aren't side characters that you like have control over or anything, right? They can or can't
I
be.
mean, it depends. I would say in like a JRPG, that'd be okay because it's a
Mhm.
JRPG. But
Oh,
in the case of like
like
general
supporting
games,
cast
yeah,
as well that
supporting
would
cast
fight
basically.
beside you.
Because like
Oh,
Mass Effect, you can kind of control the side characters. You don't play them directly, but they're your party members.
100% the Uncharted series.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I think
Because
about that.
there's just so much character in their uh, there's character somewhat in their designs within the realms of stylized realism, but the conversations they have are just so fun to listen to. And like they'll be have like when you're playing with so you're playing the main character, and if you have the love interest with you in missions, like they can be talking about what they're planning on having for dinner in the middle of shooting out an entire private military.
Yeah, I remember because I've only played through and finished 1 and 2, and it's been a very long time since I played 2. I more recently played 1, and 1 has some issues, but the characters in it are
Yeah.
really, really solid
And it
for
only
when it
gets
came out.
better from there, from character development.
Yeah,
It's insane to see them throughout the 4 and technically 5 games. It's really it's a good payoff.
I wanna pay special mention to 4 just because I think in the other 3 it was all good stuff, but it was more sort of fun surface level. But I feel like 4 kind of like puts the characters through their paces in terms of their like relationship with each other.
Oh yeah.
And so it just makes for the most interesting kind of dynamic between all of the characters that you've come to know really well. Especially
Yeah.
because they introduce a new character that kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything.
Oh yeah, you get backstory, and then after a lot of the backstory sections, it feels like you have almost had those 4 games of character development with that new character that's just been involved.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. I also want to put special shout outs to Destiny 1 because
What?
as much as everyone hates
There were
as
characters in that game.
as much as everyone hates Dinklebot,
Oh, okay.
I gotta say when I was a youngin playing Destiny 1, man, I miss the voice of Dinklebot, even if it was terrible.
That wizard came from the moon.
Wasn't very good in
Excuse
any
me,
way
Brett. You
whatsoever.
put way too much passion and energy into that. You got to
That
dial
wizard
that down
came
like
from
5
the
They
more.
moon.
didn't give him any direction. What else was he supposed to do?
It's also
You gotta sound
for people
you
that
gotta
don't
sound
know.
tired, okay?
Peter Dinklage does not like video games. Like really hates video games. And he's one of the few people who has very good reasons that I'm not going to go into. Like he had a lot of personal issues with family members in games, so I get it.
Oh.
I understand his pain, but I still don't know why he accepted a voice acting role for a
Yeah,
video game.
really.
Hey, at least we have Nathan Drake as a ghost now.
Yeah,
Who
and
I
it
don't
is
think
just
was
Nathan Drake as a ghost.
I really don't think he was too much of an improvement, to be honest with you.
No,
Yeah.
because he kind of did a Dinklebot impression, and he didn't really do too much of his own thing. I think in comparison, like he could have had a lot more fun than he ended up having with the role.
What I
Which
don't like
maybe they
about
didn't
it
want him to. I guess.
Yeah,
What I
they might
don't
have
like
directed
about
him
it is
down.
that he sounds very like timid almost, whereas like whatever you have to say about Dinklebot's voice, he had a lot more kind of like
Presence, I think.
presence. That was the word I was looking for. Whereas Dinklebot, I mean not Dinklebot, Nolan Bot just seems really like timid and like squirrely, and I think it's kind of annoying, and it doesn't really
And they
fit.
started to work
I
that
I
into his character too.
Something that I will say about this is specifically in Beyond Light, I don't think you will find a single Destiny player who has played through Beyond Light that will not say that one of the specific story missions in there where you steal a stasis gun from the Fallen is just their favorite voice line that
What?
Nolan North has ever done for Ghost. So uh, it's I guess kind of spoilery, but it's Destiny 2. So you're stealing. So stasis is the new elemental type of damage subclass, things like that that you get with the with
The expansion.
Destiny 2 Beyond Light.
God, I'm already falling
Um,
asleep. Sorry. Not you, not you. It's all destiny. Please
The man
continue.
talk.
but you're going into the Fallen's base of operations to steal what's essentially an ice grenade launcher.
Wonderful. Fun as always.
And there's an interesting development story behind this too, which is so Todd Havercorn, I believe, is the voice actor for Drifter. In
I
the
think that's correct.
game.
I can't confirm off the top
And
of my head, but I think that's correct.
You were supposed to be having Drifter narrate sort of the heist mission to steal this gun. Because of COVID-19 and maybe other work-related things, he wasn't available to do the voice lines. So they had Nolan North originally do a Todd Havercorn impression for Drifter, and he got it spot on. Like they couldn't tell the difference. Unlike when he did Cade's voice, and you could just hear that little bit of
Yeah, a
Nolan North
little
as
bit
opposed to
on
Cade's
North
voice.
leaking through.
But he was exactly like him, so they told him to tone it back a bit, and he does Ghost doing an impression of Drifter, and it's amazing.
That's pretty
What?
fun. I love stuff like that in games where like a weird development story turns into a legitimately like fun moment in the game.
Let's see these here ether tanks on this rooftop.
I have a question. Why is he the person that they always fall back on when they don't have the character's normal voice actor
I mean,
there?
I
presumably
don't
he's
know,
already got a
but
working relationship with them.
It's
it's
just
also
so
why I like
weird.
to call Destiny whoops all Nolan North.
It's accurate. It just
Yeah.
it's so weird.
I can't deny it. All right. Well, off the coattails of that, I want to talk about a kind of a different type of side character briefly, and that is procedural characters. Now,
Explain.
what I mean when I say
wait,
procedural
what?
characters is stuff like the Nemesis system and Watch Dogs Legion.
Oh.
So, I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of these games when they think of side characters, but I've recently been replaying Shadow of War, as well as playing Total War 3 Kingdoms, which has a similar system where it's not completely random characters, they're historical figures from the Three Kingdoms period in China, but they all have very unique elements to them, and the way like that characters are made very important in that game kind of has this same way of forming dynamic stories that Shadow of Mordor and War do. So that's something I really want to see in more games. Not even just like a Nemesis system, because obviously that's patented now. So we might not be getting that in other games for a while, but it is really exciting to me when I'm playing a game and there's like a character that you can have a relationship with that no one else does. So I was playing recently Shadow of War, and I keep getting beat up by this one angry little orc boy who runs around with some javelins and a big torch on his head and just like screams at you. And
As orcs do, yes.
so I started doing some digging into how that system works. And Game Maker's Toolkit came out with a really good video on it. I don't remember if this is recent or not, but a little while ago, about how the system actually works behind the scenes. And there's some really, really cool stuff that's there to kind of generate these characters that I think shows a very intimate knowledge of how character relationships work that the dev team had. So the general outline of how the system works is that in order to have unique captains, you'll probably encounter like 100 captains that you remember over the course of a Shadow of War game, essentially. So every one of those captains has to have something unique, but at the same time, they can't all be super unique, or else none of them are unique anymore, essentially. So
When
the
everyone's super,
rarity
no one will be.
of events happen. Yeah, exactly. The rarity of events happening with them changes based on how much the player interacts with them. So it is far more likely that a character will gain a unique trait if you continue to interact with them. And obviously, there's a few like caveats to that. So like if a character kills you multiple times, that's like the clearest path to that. Of if they continually kill you, you're interacting with them a lot and they're not at risk of dying. But then there are things like there's a small chance, and I'm talking small chance. It's like I think less than 5% that an enemy will not die when you kill them, and instead like have a death-defying feat. And I'm not talking like they come back later. I'm talking in the moment you're doing your kill animation, they'll like grab your sword and throw you on the ground and run away. It's super rare, but when it happens, it's incredibly memorable, and then that character like gets boosted up a lot in that ranking system for more things happening with them. So I just think that's super interesting that the game kind of encourages you to continue interacting with these people.
That is cool. I've never heard of that before.
It's really, really cool. And one thing that Shadow of War does a lot better than Mordor, I think Mordor tended to have this end point with the orcs where once you recruited them, their story was kind of done. Like that was the last point you'd ever see them really evolve. But Shadow of War, you have the ability to call in allies, and you can change that ability to instead call in a bodyguard who is an orc captain of your choosing that you've recruited. And these captains can then do some crazy stuff like save you from dying if you're getting killed. So it then extends that story that you can turn like someone who was your enemy into an ally, and you can start doing like death-defying stunts with them. So I just think that system is really, really cool, especially how they evolved it in War. And it shows a very deep knowledge of how to create those interesting stories. So I want to give some credit to that.
Yeah, really, no kidding.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, the inner
insanely
workings
complicated.
of Shadow of War's Nemesis system are really impressive. Especially because, like, at the first glance, it doesn't seem that different from Mordor's, but there's a lot of really cool things going on. So, definitely worth a playthrough now, considering the game is, like, constantly $5 for the deluxe edition on most platforms at any point of sale. So, I would definitely recommend playing the game through if you have a chance. But yeah, there's some really, really cool stuff that can happen. So, credit to the people that designed that system. But yeah, so I want to hear what's another game that you guys really like the side characters from.
I got one. So I've been playing the BioShock series recently. I finished one actually just yesterday, and I started playing 2 today. And it got me thinking a lot about because I actually played Infinite before I played 1 and 2, and I love Elizabeth as a side character, both in terms of how she interacts in gameplay, but also just her role in the story, and also just how she exists in the space. And what I mean by that is like if you're just walking around, you're doing your BioShock Infinite thing, she can just be like staring around at the sights and sounds and like be interacting with various objects in the game world itself and stuff. And literally you can just watch her do stuff and just look around at the environment and just have all these little actions going on that I thought was so cool. Um, and what's great is that she doesn't really feel like it doesn't really feel like an escort mission at all because they don't attack her, but what she does is she like is basically like a support character. And so she does these cool things like, "Oh, I'm running out of machine gun ammo." All of a sudden she's like, "Hey, Booker." And then she like throws you a bunch of like machine gun ammunition. Or like she'll throw you some coins to spend on a vending machine. And then her also obviously she also has her power of like having these tears into different points in time, and so she can call in like different machines to help you out or set up like bits of cover and stuff like that. So I think she adds a lot to the gameplay and the combat, but also just talking with her and how different your guys' perspectives are as characters on the city you're in and just how everything progresses with the story, I think is just super, super cool. And she was also voice acted beautifully and also animated beautifully as well. Like I said, just her interacting with the environment was just so interesting to watch sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that reinforces what I was saying about like how Shadow of War gets you to care about characters by making you interact with them a lot. Like you are constantly interacting with Elizabeth. It's not just like she's there. She is constantly like helping you out in combat and like a constant component of what you're doing.
And that's a really important thing to make like a good side character that you care about. They have to they have to have a good like presence in the story, but also presence in the gameplay as well.
Which
And
makes
I think go ahead.
Oh, sorry, which makes the ending hurt so much more.
Yeah, and it's why like and it's why she's so effective is because like she's a legitimate aid in combat. Like I can't tell you how many times it's like, oh crap, like I'm using the sniper rifle and there's like a ton of guys that are out of reach and I don't really have anything else, and then all of a sudden she just hands me more sniper rounds and it's just oh, it's so nice. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think BioShock's definitely a good game for that. I think in the similar vein to BioShock, kind of, not really, but Dishonored does similar stuff with its companion characters, where you have a like rotating rogues gallery essentially of allies and villains that kind of alternate at certain points, and you have a lot of relationships with these side characters that you get to know a lot about, and it makes it very satisfying as a Brett, Alex, and I were having a fun watch night of a show the other day, and Brett very eloquently put it that it makes it a lot more gratifying when you see someone get completely and utterly destroyed.
Don't remind me.
When it is made very clear how horrible they are. And Dishonored especially is very good at that. So I think that also, on the negative end, makes a lot of bad side characters, evil side characters, very, very fun to interact with.
Yeah,
And you
how
get
to
to
make
see,
a
like,
villain is
yeah,
very important.
especially in
what
the case
also
of like
does
not a
that?
main villain.
Mm.
What was that, Brett?
You know what also does that pretty well, I think, with side villains, side characters. Metal Gear Solid it's like the side characters in the cast of Metal Gear Solid are like they talk more than Snake does. It feels like, and especially with like some of the like you'll walk up to um like a boss room and you'll just get paragraphs and paragraphs of how like
Yeah.
horrifying of a person they are, and then it's like the most annoying gimmicky PS1 boss fight in the world, but
You
then
know,
you're brought, what were you gonna say?
or maybe a 70-minute cutscene.
70-minute cutscene, and you're brought down from the high of finally just defeating them by even longer than the boss fight, the scene of them having their dramatic Shakespearean death of, yes, they were a terrorist, they've killed this many people, their lives have been completely ruined from the day they were born on this planet, but then in typical Kojima fashion they get the huge send off of Snake just standing over their what is essentially talking corpse.
Yeah.
All the interactions with all the side characters and the people that Snake talks to in that game are like absolute gold. They're perfection.
Yeah, I think especially Kojima in general has a real talent for
Yeah.
characters like that, and a lot of the time it's ridiculous. Like, but I think that's part of the charm. So when a character called like Die Hard Man gets you to do
I
things
was
in
just
Death Stranding,
It's always Die Hard, man.
because it's the one that is the most insane, especially for a character that is very straight laced, like Die Hardman is.
He's the most like serious character out of like
the entire cast basically. So yeah, I think Kojima
not that
especially
Fragile is that much better.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Oh,
Yeah, Fragile's pretty good. We got Die Hardman, we got just Mama.
Mama, yeah.
Man, I love Kojima. And that's to say, like, a lot of those characters are really, really compelling. So I think making you care despite the fact that they're ridiculous, and then sometimes because they're ridiculous.
It's another achievement.
Yeah, I mean it's similar to when you're playing an Ace Combat or Project Wingman, and you're just referring to characters as like, oh yeah, that's Diplomat. We call him Dip. It's still a ridiculous name for someone. But in the moment, you really don't care.
It's a pretty ridiculous name, if you ask me.
Okay,
And, like,
that's it.
I gotta give it to Wingman especially because I think Wingman has a line that gets said like offhandedly at the start of a mission that actually explains why you never use people's names. It's like, yeah, if you guys use your names, you know enemy might be able to listen into our chatter. So that's on you if you get caught.
It's because you're working for a mercenary organization. So if they find out your identity, they're just gonna kill you because you're fighting an actual military.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun when you get that kind of little bit of detail. Yeah, continue, Brett.
And I'm also I am also being pestered by someone who is currently listening and is DMing me to talk about something that I promised that I would talk about.
Yeah.
Very very strange situation for a side character to be in. Gilgamesh in the Final Fantasy series is I jokingly, half jokingly, said that he was my favorite character in Final Fantasy V.
Yeah.
Because he's the funny boss with the cool music, because Clash on the Big Bridge plays. But then like you meet him in this horrible void near the end of the game, and instead of fighting you, he just has this really dramatic speech about him being trapped in the void. And
Oh.
normally that would just be like, "Oh wow, what a what a strange thing for it to be the most heart-wrenching character of this funny little game. That's crazy." And then Square Enix uses the fact that he's trapped in the void to just put him in other Final Fantasy games that are not tied
Yeah.
to 5 at all.
It's
And he
great.
just appears in other ones and is constantly like, "Yeah, it's okay. This isn't the right place. Where's the main character from 5? Do you guys know who he is? Oh, don't kill me." And you have to fight
Oh.
him every time. But it's I would be torn apart.
I also love that in 15 he just becomes a very serious boss out of nowhere.
Is it really?
Yeah, he's like the gatekeeper of power or something. I don't fully remember because the story in that game is kind of like a fever dream. So, yeah, but yeah, he has a bit of a different role in that game. I think it's a lot of fun. And I also got to shout out. You say Final Fantasy bosses with cool music. I just got to point out Final Fantasy 14 has a boss called Alexander Prime, and his theme has a moment where it stops and screams Sonic Boom, and then they start rapping. And this is a theme that is in the game. I've posted it in the chat if you scroll up a little bit.
That's sick.
But man, it is incredible. It is maybe my favorite moment in any Final Fantasy song ever.
I'll listen to it after this.
Because it sounds straight out of like a Sonic game.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like some Sonic butt rock going on.
But it is incredible. So yeah, I gotta get your reaction to that afterwards, Brett. But
Yeah.
I think Final Fantasy especially has got some really standout characters. Like even though 15 was pretty much panned a lot for how it handled displaying its story, I don't think anyone can say that like the main cast wasn't a great dynamic. Like they really nailed the sense of being on a road trip with buds. Now, whether or not that was a good thing to have in the Final Fantasy game in the first place is very debatable, but they nailed the feeling they were going for.
That seems to be the thing that people most appreciate about that game. And in
Yeah.
the sea of things that are awful about it, that seems to be the one island of this is okay.
Yeah, it's just really fun to see all the character interactions. I think it's just a shame the game has a habit of like not allowing you to see scenes unless you do very specific events that trigger things. There's a really, really cool scene with Prompto, who's your camera buddy, who takes cool screenshots in fights. You can get this really, really cool bit of backstory about him. But for that backstory to make sense, you have to have watched the 4-episode anime that they put out beforehand.
Of course.
So it's just a lot of like little things if they decided to put the backstory in a 4-episode kind of mediocre, weird anime. There was the Kingsglaive movie that, to be honest, was better than any of the story actually in Final Fantasy 15.
Which you need to watch to understand the story,
but
right?
that's not saying very much.
No, Kingsglaive is legitimately entertaining. Like, it's a good movie. It's got some really cool action scenes.
All right.
But you can play Final Fantasy 15 without having seen Kingsglaive, because Kingsglaive seems like it has a lot of importance to the plot of 15, then really doesn't. then
Oh.
really doesn't.
Oh.
The only difference it makes is, of course, as a character that's used as the driving force. And this is an example of how not to do a side character. Lunafreya is a side character in Final Fantasy 15 who is very important throughout the start of the game because she's like the driving interest for your main character, Noctis, to kind of get to this location so he can meet her and do some cool magic stuff, essentially. So there's a lot of build up to meeting her. You meet her, and then she's just never in the game again.
Cool.
You meet her, and then that's it. Like, she's done.
Good.
You don't... Which is such a shame, because if you watch Kingsglaive, she's a really cool character. She does some really awesome stuff. And then in the main game, you kind of see her do, like, one thing, and then she's just not in the story anymore, which is a very real shame, because there are basically no good side characters in that game that are compelling.
Sounds like it kind of got the Destiny treatment where the anime is
Yeah.
Grimoire cards.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very
kind
similar.
of a good comparison, actually. There's a lot we can say about Final Fantasy 15, but yeah, one game I do think is noticeable for us having not talked about it yet is Cyberpunk.
I was gonna say we can't
Wait
we
for
can't
it.
So-
have this episode and not talk about Jackie. I
So
mean,
yeah, I want to give a special set of shoutouts to Cyberpunk because I think regardless of your beef with that game, especially because the game deserves a lot of beef, the one thing that you cannot ding that game for is the writing of the side characters. Like, every single one of them is phenomenal. And I really, really think it deserves a lot of special praise for that. Not for most of the game, but for that. To specify. However, I will put the caveat here of we're planning to do an actual episode on Cyberpunk, so I don't want to get too into the character stories because we will be doing like a spoiler episode where we can fully talk about them in a lot more detail.
to sum it up, though, there were
Yeah.
multiple times for multiple different side characters where it did. I got pretty emotional about it. Like, I'm not even.
And if you know why, he doesn't
ashamed
get
in any
emotional about
way.
anything.
Shut up.
I'm sorry.
Literally
It's not. That's not true.
That is not true. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that kind of alone says a lot. Where it's like if you can get legitimately emotional over, you know, and
Pixels
for
on
very
a
different
screen.
for very different reasons too. And
Yeah,
not to
every
go into
character has a
why.
very different like backstory and like set of things that makes you care about them.
They all end differently too. Like, they don't all just like, okay, you helped me with this thing, I guess we're cool now. No, they all are in very different places in the story and just and everything in general. Not to go
Yeah.
too specific with it.
But yeah, we'll talk about the Cyberpunk characters in depth, but yeah, special shout out to that game. If you can have a PC and can play the mostly bug-free version, especially if you're into character writing, it is a really, really good kind of case study on what to do right for a lot of side characters. Especially the ones that are like ever present, like Johnny is a super convincing character by the end of the game.
It is
I
quite
will
an
say-
evolution.
Yeah.
I was gonna, because for the longest time I was like, I feel like he's kind of one note, and then it takes a complete 180, and it took me by surprise. It was
Yeah.
kind of shocking.
So yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting game for that perspective. So another game I like to mention, not necessarily for the strength of its side characters, but for the sheer memorability of them, is I'm Sworn to Carry Your Burden, Skyrim, and the Elder Scrolls in general. So I think the interesting thing to look at with the Elder Scrolls is that I really believe Oblivion and I don't remember Morrowind nearly as clearly. I vaguely remember there being some good side characters in Morrowind.
They didn't have companions, though, I believe.
Yeah.
But those aren't side.
No, I would count companions as side characters.
Well, I mean, they don't have to be companions to be side characters.
They don't have to. Which is what I was going to say, because I think Martin in Oblivion is a really, really compelling character, who you're spending a lot of the game like learning about this like son of the Emperor, and you get to do some really, really cool stuff with him. And by the end of the game, you kind of realize you're not the protagonist of the game. He is.
You're the hero of Kvatch, not the hero of this story.
Yeah, which I think works really well for an Elder Scrolls game because it means you don't need to fall into the the chosen one trope that Skyrim does.
Yeah.
And you get a lot more
Which
freedom
is why
to
I'm
make
worried
your
about
character.
6.
Yeah, you get a lot more freedom to kind of direct what your character is like. But Oblivion especially has some super memorable side characters, and I think every one of the guilds has memorable stuff. So yeah, I want to give a shout out to that. Skyrim, on the other hand, has some cool characters, but it's got a lot of fluff, and by fluff I mean Lydia. So,
who is, in case you forgot, sworn to carry your burdens, just in case you forgot.
And God, what's her name? Serena?
Yeah, I think Serena is the. I think Serena is probably how they say it. It's been a while since I played it. Serana, I think.
Who's the
Serana?
Serana.
Another one that I traveled with a lot back when I played a lot of Skyrim. What's the elf guy's name that you meet really early on?
Faendal.
Yes. Faendal.
Yeah, I think there is one good side character, or at least one good companion in Skyrim, and that's Serana. Because she actually has a lot to say about what you're doing most of the time. And that the unfortunate thing of them having so many companions in Skyrim, I think, is that a lot of them don't have any depth.
It's quantity, not quality.
Yeah, and a few of them are better than others. Like I remember there's a dark elf near like Winterhold. That has like a mace. He's like a dark mage. No, not her. There's a like a mace and dark mage priest dude you can get who has some like cool lines about the surrounding area.
He's up in that's one of the one of the Daedric weapon quests, right?
Yeah, he's an optional side character from a Daedric weapon quest. You can totally like not have him, and he's also a character that can die. Like he's not one of the ones that's flagged as important. So it was fun to have him traveling with me because he actually has a lot of cool things to say about locations in that region of Skyrim. But characters like Lydia really don't. Like Lydia, I think, has a grand total of like 10 responses, it feels like at times. So yeah, I think that's a shame, is that the characters that are meant to be like these really important, I forget the term they use, but the guards to the Thanes should have more importance than they actually do, especially the one that you encounter as part of like the main story, essentially. So it's a shame that she especially didn't get any cool interactions. And the one thing with Serana that I love, and I don't know if you all know this, Serana has been bugged in Skyrim for a very long time. And her bug is bad. It's really bad. In that if you have her and you use vampire spells, they do less damage.
Oh.
What?
Yep.
What?
Yep.
Why?
Oops.
If you have Serana and you use Vampire Drain, it does dramatically less damage than it normally would.
It just works.
I just want to know what spaghetti code led to that.
15 times the detail.
And of course, there are mods that fix that. It's not an issue that is terribly prevalent. I think even on consoles at this point, it's been fixed. And it's simple to download a mod that can essentially, like, there are two workarounds to it. You either actually fix the bug or you just buff the spells by an insane amount.
There are companion mods as well, like Inigo or Lucian.
Yeah, Inigo, Lucian, and I forget the name of the there's one, I think, European woman who's made a mod since like Morrowind of a character that just like reoccurs in the world that has a ton of voice acting. That's really, really solid. So I think Inigo is probably the one that's most well known for being a mod that's just extremely well written and has a lot of interaction, as well as like a memorable side character with their actual missions.
Yeah. Yeah, having side characters with quests in Skyrim, very much needed.
I mean, there's a handful, but most of the ones with quests are either really mediocre quests or just their quest is the end of them. Like the beginning and the end, there's like the lioness woman in Riften who wants to root out crime.
Oh yeah.
But that's kind of like
Unbroken?
Yeah, I think that is her. That's either her or the woman who you fight in a bar who joins you if you beat her up. There's one of those two. I don't remember their names, but yeah, there's some characters that have dramatically more dialogue than others. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame because I think Oblivion did a lot better in having a lot of interesting side characters with unique missions and whatnot. Though the lack of needing the companion stories and whatnot is probably why that happened. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see where that could have gone. And I wonder what Starfield's gonna do
If it ever comes out.
if it ever comes out. Good point. Because
We'll have to
we didn't talk about this last time, but we did get news that I think neither Starfield was not slated for this year. It's slated for next year at the earliest, which means we likely won't be getting Elder Scrolls 6 till 2026.
Yeah.
I think
Which-
it's not going to be until 2030.
It makes me laugh every time. It's so absurd.
It's just, man, they have Bethesda
And
has
it's gonna
this
become the
cash
next-
cow. This it's free money that you can print if you just release it.
I think Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be the next No Man's Sky Cyberpunk again because they announced it. If they do anything else up until a month before it releases, it's going to be horrible. There's going to be way too much hype over it.
Yeah. I'm in that boat. It feels like that same type of announcement of like game big, expectation big company, everyone's favorite company on earth making it. Takes 38 years to make.
I'm sorry, did you just say that Bethesda is everyone's favorite game company?
Yeah, well, they make a lot of everyone's favorite games, Wyatt. Okay, it's
Yeah,
part of the
they
same
do.
thing.
You want to take the last couple of years as an example?
I mean, average Joe
I
who
think
doesn't
not.
who doesn't follow the games industry super closely and just buys games from studios they like Bethesda hasn't released anything aside from Fallout 76, and even then, that was like a subsidiary. So there's really not much in the way there. So I think there's going to be either a lot of disappointed people or a lot of really happy people when 6 happens, and no middle ground.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
They're starving for options.
Whereas I think if they had taken less time and released essentially Skyrim 2, just like same engine, fix some of the bugs, you can even use the same map and just expand it a little bit.
Well, what was
like?
Well, I say Elder Scrolls 6 fans are going to be starved for content. What is that game that it's made by Obsidian that looks a lot like the Elder Scrolls series?
Awoken, I think it's called.
Maybe something like that. That's not soon, but that's probably going to come out before 6.
Yeah, it's a Pillars of Eternity universe game.
Ooh.
That is a first-person RPG. So, yeah, that will probably at this rate come out before Elder Scrolls 6, or very soon to the release of Elder Scrolls 6, which will be entertaining to see. Although that would be a while. Like, Obsidian tends to not announce things that early. We usually get a cinematic trailer, and then like a year later we'll get gameplay. So I would be surprised.
I mean, they haven't in the past, but I could see it being a Microsoft thing where they wanted something to show off, even if it's not.
I mean, that'd be weird though, because Microsoft owns Bethesda now.
Yeah.
So they don't need to do that.
That is really weird, huh?
Yeah.
I keep forgetting that, to be honest.
It's like Microsoft owns both the competition to Elder Scrolls and Elder Scrolls at the same time.
Just make more hype and make more money.
Hey, I'm okay with that. If we get 2 good RPGs out of it, I'm happy.
Especially if we can get like some really good like Xbox exclusives now, like if we can really start kind of ramping up the competition in terms of like PlayStation and Xbox and like
I would much prefer the Elder Scrolls to be available on PC. Thank you very much.
No. I'm not saying
Microsoft
pre-established.
exclusives?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I'm not saying they should take pre-established franchises and make them exclusive. I think that would be kind of a dick move. But if they take these studios and they make new IP that's meant to be Microsoft exclusives, I'm very much for it.
And alternatively, I would love to see them using it as a bargaining chip to get Sony to start releasing exclusives non-exclusively. Like essentially we could just eliminate exclusives altogether.
That would be nice.
Which I think is the ideal situation for consumers, but not the ideal situation for developers.
Yeah.
It's a 2-party system. Xbox and PlayStation.
And then way out in the back, you got Nintendo doing whatever Nintendo weird stuff they're doing over there.
Yeah.
Not that it's bad, but they're just
Nintendo stuff.
Nintendo just doesn't care.
They really don't, and
They
it ends
It's
really
up
great.
don't.
It's
it ends up
wonderful.
with good things and it ends up with bad things sometimes. Like they just make some stupid decisions and then they'll release like a great game or like do a really cool thing.
You know, like
It's insane.
Smash
I,
and their
I will say,
community.
I will say the one thing that I like about having platform exclusivity is that it really invigorates both Microsoft and Sony to keep on top of their game. You know, like really try and like outdo each other. And what that does is that it makes in terms of like competing to make great content, and we kind of benefit from that because they're both trying to outdo each other.
I mean, to be honest, I don't
Which is
think
seen as a good thing.
exclusives contribute to that. I think that would happen regardless. Just like
'Cause
trying
Still,
to make
though,
the
I think it
consoles and
helps
games
with
better.
that, though. To be
I'm
honest.
thinking of one example that obviously doesn't, represent the entire thing because it's just one example, but like innovation because like that just seems wrong to me because like Killzone's entire existence is because Microsoft had Halo and Sony wanted a big shooty shoot to have, and Killzone is, Killzone and Halo is one of the most important first person shooter franchises to ever exist. Like that, a console having an exclusive game, yet pushes the other console to make an exclusive equivalent that is like a shadow of the
Yeah,
actually
we
good
saw
version.
a ton of that in like early 2090s with the platformer craze. Like everyone was trying to make mascot platformers,
It's
and nobody
exactly
succeeded.
exactly.
We only have like Sonic and Mario now because everything else was awful, like universally awful, or was different enough to be its own thing, regardless, like Crash and Banjo-Kazooie. So I don't think like exclusivity drives games. I think competition drives games to get better, and that competition would exist regardless. In fact, I think it would probably be more extreme if things were available on every platform. But obviously, that's like an unrealistic reality.
Yeah.
That's not the way business works. So I wouldn't expect that to happen. But it would be an interesting move, especially with Microsoft making a lot of like forward-facing community moves and really trying to kind of broaden the like Xbox and Microsoft brand into something a little bit more general than I think just like the console, which has been working for Microsoft a lot. So like Game Pass is a really, really good platform both for consumers, and I'm sure it's making Microsoft a lot of money at this point. So I would not be surprised if they continue that strategy.
I hope they do.
Yeah. And it's also like I just think exclusives in general tend to they drive console sales. I don't think they drive game sales ever. Like
If anything,
I
they
think
make the game sales worse.
like if Spider-Man was on both platforms, guarantee you it would have sold probably twice as much.
Oh yeah,
because it's
I would have
Spider-Man.
it.
But because it's exclusive, it's a game that is instead being used to drive console sales of Sony's platform. Which it works. Like that's why I have a PS4 and not an Xbox One, because a lot of the games I like to play are released on PS4 and not Xbox One, and I can play most of those Xbox One games on my PC. So I have options. But at the same time, like for Microsoft, it doesn't matter because they own Windows. So
Yeah.
either way, they're winning. So I think they're in a different situation than Sony is, because Sony doesn't have like their own computing platform that they can kind of have exclusive marketplaces on and whatnot. But yeah, it's very aside from the goals for today, and it's also our marker for time. We've been going for a while now.
Oh wow.
So I'm gonna say anything to add?
No.
No. All right, we good. Alex, you sound like you got something.
Just another quick mention, because I will never not mention this game when I'm given a chance. Nintendo's Professor Layton series for side characters.
You gotta.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Layton and Phoenix, right? You gotta throw it for both of those franchises.
It's all story and it's all good, and the twists are amazing.
Yeah, gotta throw that out there. I'll throw in as well.
And the
I the
Nonary
Somnium
games.
Files.
Yeah.
So I the Somnium Files, made by the Nonary Games writer, really amazing. Like I hesitate to call it a visual novel because it's really not, but like puzzle detective adventure, probably the best way to put it. really fantastic and some of the like best twists I've seen in a game.
Damn.
Yeah, and super good side characters too, especially because like the game works by putting you on different, essentially timelines of what's happening, and you have to kind of piece together the puzzle based on how characters react to different events that happen in those different timelines. So you'll see a character pushed to their breaking point in one, and then you can kind of judge their reactions when they're not in the other timeline, and that like unlocks different pathways for you to explore. Really, really cool game and great characterization. Yeah. All right. So with that, we've hit shoutouts. We do our shoutouts. And Wyatt, I know you're ready.
I am. My shout out goes to the Gorillaz' newest album, or album. It's technically called a season, called Song Machine Season 1, Strange Times. It came out last year, and it was basically just a bunch of music that was made with a bunch of different collaborators, and each piece of music was basically influenced by the collaborator they were working with. So, and you get some really like kooky, weird combinations. So, like the weirdest one that sticks out in my brain, they have a song with the rapper Black and Elton John, and it is such a weird combination of artists, but it works so well, and it's bizarre. And all of these songs were written and produced individually over 2020, so a lot of the songs kind of reflect 2020 as like a whole, depending on like when it came out, and it's just such a cool idea for an album. And there isn't a single song that comes to mind that I don't like, and it's just fantastic. And you should go check it out because it's really cool.
Sounds good.
So,
all right.
yeah,
I'm going to pop in here. I got a recommendation for a shout out to a game called Valheim that came out pretty recently in early access. It is one of the most polished early access games I've ever played. It's got a ton of content, and it's a PvE survival game. So think like Rust, but not with a bunch of screaming 12-year-olds.
Ooh,
That's
and
the best part.
It's
so
got
rare.
private multiplayer, private dedicated servers, complete single player where you can just do whatever you want. It has, I think, the best like building system in a game. I built a Viking longhouse yesterday. It was great. You have to like weigh the supports and make sure that the building will stay on its foundation and not collapse. But that sounds like a pain. Like it sounds like that'd be awful. But they do it in a way that's very streamlined, and it's extremely easy to get a grasp on. And it makes like building these structures essentially like a puzzle. And that's not even to mention the fact that it's got Terraria-style boss progression, where you have a bunch of bosses to go fight in an open world, and you can go sail ships and whatnot. Really, really fun game,
awesome.
and it's $20. So I have already gotten well above my money's worth out of it. Super fun. I have a feeling Ben and I are probably going to talk about it again on the podcast soon. So yeah, great game. All right, who's ready? Brett or Alex?
I can go unless Alex Labella is exploding with anticipation.
I am not exploding. I'm barely at a simmer, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta wait for him to begin fuming.
And then it's time to get scared. Okay. Well, as the people that are in the Discord right now have probably been forced to keep up with, I've had a madman's time with both of these Zone of the Enders games. And I played the first one, and it's the first Zone of the Enders game, so it was just kind of like cool, like a flat line
hey,
of
Brett,
cool.
Who directed the Zone of the Enders games? If you wouldn't mind telling us.
Not directed, only produced.
Well, yeah, produced.
Kojima.
Well, in Japan, those essentially mean the same thing. So
It's I get the sense that he like laid a finger on it, and that was it.
really,
But yes, they are Kojima games.
he walked in the office one day to see what they were working on, and that's it.
That seems to be the lore behind it, from what I've heard. But it does have the Metal Gear mechanical designer for all the giant robots, so they all look insanely cool. But I started playing the second one, and I wanted to hurl myself out the window. And then I turned the difficulty down, and I had a better time. So you should play it. It has a remaster on Steam, and it's probably even better. I ended up liking it in the end. That's probably an important thing to point out. But
yeah,
just
tune the
it drove me
difficulty.
insane.
He
Also,
walked
shout
into
out
the office.
that mech designer Yoji Shinkawa, incredible.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Very, very good
Master.
artist. All right, Alex. I hear the like whistle blowing of the steam simmering, ready to release unto us your shout out.
Okay, get ready to receive my shout out. Oh no!
This
What?
went downhill real quick.
Give it to
All
us.
right, all right, hit us with it.
Some very nice extreme vanilla cupcakes that I made the other day.
Oh,
Nice. As is-
sublime.
You know, I was gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. I'll say it after we're done.
That's probably a good choice. Leave the horrible endings
Yeah.
to Wyatt, Brett,
All
and
right.
I.
Well, that means I'm gonna start playing the outro. You guys can find the podcast every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. or live on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. We hope you all have a great grand time. Woo.
Man.
It's deflated laughter.
Aw.
So how about those vampire children?
Oh my
Well, we
god.
still gotta finish. You know, we got like 3 seconds left.